Start by saying that I so wanted to love this book. And then, dear watchers, listeners, readers, I did not. Hi friends, I'm Jolie Black, and I think I'm meant to be the ideal audience for this book. I'm a postdoctoral researcher and I'm a teacher based at a UK university, and I study ancient magic. I am Alice Law. If you're new to the channel and new to me, I have 2 PhDs from 2 different academic eras. So I've got some understanding of the way that things have changed in academia between the 1990s, 2000s and 2017 to 2025. I did a degree in geography, of all things, and went straight on to a PhD in historical geography, which was something that you actually could do back then. And I was based in feminist analysis of women's employment and life choices in Victorian Lancashire. So I also have a background in that particular era of feminism that Kuang is attempting to engage with. Then I went into the world. I discovered I was absolutely useless at everything except sitting in dusty archives, having deep thoughts about things. I had a breakdown during the financial crash. I lost everything, and then eventually came back to academia as a safe space for me. Discovered that I was autistic. Now I also have a master's and a PhD in classics and ancient history with a specialism in, quite literally, ancient magic. You can find my other videos introducing you to all the kind of magical handbooks that I usually work with and the grimoires of Greco-Roman Egypt around. Put some links up for you. Sometimes I like to discuss drama in the YouTube space and the booktube space because there's actually a big intersection between ancient magic, dark academia and fantasy as well. So probably going to do more on that. So I am kind of Alice Law. And when I originally thought about doing this video, as I first started the book, I thought, I'm just going to say, oh, I am Alice Law. Would I go to hell to get my supervisor back so I could pass a panel committee? Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, I totally would. I'm that kind of nuts. That kind of obsessive. I have 2 PhDs. I work in academia on a precarious 0-hours contract so I can have access to the uni library, and I write fiction on the side. I have issues. When I started reading Katabasis, I thought I was going to love it. You can see it on Leanna's library. We did a 2.5-hour discussion of Babel a few weeks ago, and one of the things that came up was just how weighty and often slow Kuang's voice was in that book. She has shifted tack here away from the long essay as novel to a voice that attempts to be sort of more satirical, more tongue-in-cheek, while tackling these massive issues. She tries to take on a lot in one go in this book. The central focus is a skewing of academia, but there is also some attempt to engage with how it deals with ableism, but also feminism and anti-feminism, and a particular brand of feminism that is common among women of a certain type. And so she's trying to do a hell of a lot in one go. And I think she's tried to make it lighter and kind of easier to swallow. So we're supposed to be having fun with this unlikable character. I definitely think that helps. It made it easier to get into. It launched straight into the fun stuff. Katabasis is literally a journey into hell that was part of a long-standing literary tradition in the ancient world that she is obviously appealing to. And yeah, I've read a lot of those kind of things from the classical world. And just to note, when I say classics and classical world, I do mean the ancient world of like around 0 BCE, heading into the deep, deep past, not just the 19th century. So right now, I feel like Twist in Spaced when she shows up on the doorstep and she looks Daisy up and down and goes, oh, I can really see what you were trying to do there. God damn. Anyway, a brief summary of Katabasis. So I should put this up. Let me just put this up. Like a proper booktuber. A brief summary of Katabasis. Alice Law is a final year PhD student at Cambridge who has killed her horrible supervisor in an analytical magic experiment gone wrong. His body was splattered all over the walls. She decides to go to hell in a Dante-esque expedition to get him back because she needs him alive in order to get her PhD. She is sold to us as selfish, driven, and ambitious. And I will confess, I did feel kind of seen. And I thought, I can relate to that. I can relate to the desire to be perfect. I can relate to wanting to be a straight A student, the desire to please, the constant people pleasing that is part of both being autistic, but also being that kind of wannabe academic. So, full confession here, that's me. Once again, cautionary tale, this is me. Midway through trying to get to hell, her arch nemesis, a whimsical wafty white boy and perfect scholar who gets all the prizes, Peter Murdoch, shows up and provides us with the romantic interest plus tension. He goes with her to hell, and together they explore the 8 circles while Alice deals with the fact that her brutal, selfish ambitiousness is kind of horrible for everybody, especially herself, and also has to wrestle with the fact that the supervisor she believes is amazing is actually complete dick, just an awful human being. So here I have to admit, and yet another thing, it's all of the confessions today. As of filming this piece, I have not actually finished the book, and that is for 2 reasons. One, this is the second time I've read a Kwang book up to a point and then gone, you know what, I just don't have the mental space for this right now. I'm going to lean very heavily on Willow Reed's books and her argument that you do not have to finish a book in order to comment on it. Probably I could say more things if I had finished it, but I really wanted to get it done because I'm just putting it off. And 2, at about page 431, my own academic semester started and I suddenly got flung into teaching and earning money again, and I have been in a constant state of catch up and cope for the last 4 weeks. I also had my flu jab, which meant I was really ill for a day, and then it was really chaotic last week because there was a lot of DIY happening in my house, and DIY causes my sensory sensitivities to just go off like anything, so I was quite unwell from that. So those are my excuses. I don't know if I even want to finish the book at this point. That is my comment on finishing books, is I don't believe you should have to finish books that you don't like or you are struggling with. I know that there is a lot of discourse around DNFing books and that you should finish things because you may learn from them. I think you would have to be quite young and have a lot of time and energy to be able to make that argument, because I'm 47, I'm tired, I don't have the time to give to things that I don't want to do, given how much that I have to do that I don't want to do in life. So I also don't think that it's necessarily a problem that Alice Law is really quite unlikable as a character. I did still relate to her. Growing up in the early 1980s and the 1990s, her particular brand of anti-feminism was very common. It evolved into a sort of feminism that was based around, if we are more like men, we drink beer, we go out, we get completely hammered of an evening. That particular type of feminism that says if you make yourself more like a man, then you're more acceptable. I remember that very, very strongly. It's not something that I'm going to get into, but I do think sometimes having your shadow self seen and get picked apart can make books more effective. I think characters who are problematic can be relatable. They can work well. Kwang attempts to do quite a lot of stuff. So she attempts to tackle academic precarity, the skinny academic girl chic that is super niche, but I had an ED at university as well. She is, I think, attempting to skewer a very specific dark academic aesthetic of the slightly limp, skinny academic girl who appeals to a particular type of predatory male academic advisor who's also being skewered, and the larger systems that operate to maintain these oppressive and destructive systems. I don't think it effectively does either. In terms of structure, the book bounces between the plot that is unfolding in Hell, where Alice and Peter are basically on the standard Katabatic quest, just made up the word Katabatic, through Hell. That's very Dante, it's very Dante-esque, very standard, although she does make reference to a lot of other things in the backstory of her relationship with Peter. The latter is done much better than the former. So when she goes into the flashbacks where she is building up the romantic side of her of the Alice Law Peter Murdoch relationship, I found that way more effective than the Hell stuff, and we're going to kind of get into why. Hell turns out to be really kind of tedious. I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to talk about the shoveling in of academic reference points first. A particular quality of Kuang's writing is the desire to provide these cultural reference points. The culture here is academia, and the reference points are all the things you do when you are meant to know about if you consider yourself to be a well-read, scholarly type of person. Aside from Dante, we have discussions of logic, specific philosophies from both the ancient and the modern world, from the East and Western traditions, Orphic hymns, and all the other references to hell found in pretty much any canon from any tradition that you want to name. Now, I'm going to say here, earlier in this video, I referenced Spaced and Twist, and that is a deep cut for those of us who are into 2000s humour and the history of Simon Pegg and Jessica Hines. Now that is me doing that same kind of referencing. I'm appealing to a group of people and I'm saying, you will understand me if you understand this reference, you are welcome in here. Now it starts off being quite intimidating when Kuang does it. It's the same with Babel, it is the same here. You know those people who want you to think that they're smart because they mention obscure sections of Plato offhand? It's like that. I've seen some people say, do you need to know all of this background in order to understand Katabasis? And my answer is pretty much no. You are fine, actually. What she's doing isn't really all that different to what other authors do when they're appealing to a particular subculture's reference points. Ernest Cline's Ready Player One is absolutely packed with nostalgic references to aspects of 1980s video gaming and Western cult movie knowledge. The whole plot is based on what was a standard of 1980s movies. It's this React plot summary, including the girl as a trophy motif that I particularly hate. When you read Ready Player One, you understand those references and you feel like you belong, like you are being appealed to and seen by the author. This welcomes you in. These references act as invitations in and options to self-yeet. So if you recognise it and you don't like it, you can go. If you don't recognise it and you feel overwhelmed, you also can self-yeet. Either, yay, 1980s geek nostalgia, I feel so important and seen, or, oh God, not more of this, it was bad enough the first time round. Though, if you think of every one of Kuang's references in that light, you see that she's appealing to a particular academic subculture. You get to feel super knowledgeable and special because you understand the logical philosophy and paradoxes, and you've read the Orphic hymns. These are shibboleths that invite you in or keep you out. I'm curious actually because although Kuang mentions the Orphic hymns and Orpheus's many trips into hell, there is no reference anywhere to the Orphic tablets. So I'm about to do a little bit of a tangent because early on in the book, I thought about this and I was thought it was kind of weird that they're not in there anywhere. It seemed to me that if you were doing an actual trip to hell and you understood about the Orpheus connection and his many trips to hell, that you would understand about the cult of Orpheus in Greece, which seems to have produced these tablets. Hey, I'm back to tablets again. This time they are made of gold. It reminds me of an issue I had with Babel, actually, that I talked about in the conversation with Liena, that was Kuang's use of these constant academic references that kind of miss crucial features, like the absence of silver tablets from the ancient world, the absence of these particular texts that I work with. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's because I know about this stuff and I'm showing off. I don't know. So we have a small but significant collection of gold tablets that were found in amongst the grave goods of bodies in various parts of Greece. We don't know really much about them. They are fascinating because they provide explicit instructions for travelling into the underworld after death. They've triggered a lot of discussion in academic circles around the existence of an Orphic cult that might have existed in different parts of Greece, because the tablets kind of come from all over. It's intriguing that they are so dispersed. They're what's called a totem pass, a passport to the underworld that appear in a range of cultures. I did some work on these during my master's on an epigraphy course, and the texts that I've actually got here are from the edition by Radcliffe G Edmonds III, which I will put in the description below, but I will also share a little bit on Patreon if you're interested. Now, this is why I thought they would have been such a great addition to the book, because having access to those tablets provides you both with instructions to get to the underworld and a speech that you have to make to a divine entity in order to access the underworld in the first place. This tablet is from the 4th century BC, around it's known as A3 Thurii. It is about 46 to 25 millimeters. It's made of gold. Pure I come from the pure, queen of those below the earth, and Euclase and Eubuleus and the other gods and daimons, for I also claim that I am of your blessed race. Recompense I have paid on account of deeds not just. Either fate mastered me or the lightning bolt thrown by the thunderer. Now I come as a suppliant to holy Persephonea, that she, gracious, may send me to the seats of the blessed. So that is a speech that is intended to be given to somebody that is undead. So the tablet was rolled up, folded, and it was placed with a body that was part of this cult, with a whole number of other artifacts around it that suggest that it was some kind of an offering. So the person who died would have that speech ready for them on this tablet that they could use once they got into hell or the afterlife. And here's another one. This is A4 Thurii from 4th century BCE. But when the soul leaves the light of the sun, go straight to the right, having kept watch on all things very well. You having experienced the experience you have not experienced before. A god you have become from a man. A kid you fell into milk. Hail, hail. Make your way to the right, the sacred meadows and groves of Persephonea. Now, again, it's something of a statement, and it is also a set of instructions for where to go and what to do in hell. Seems useful. They spend some time in Katabasis making maps of the underworld and how to get around. So it seems like, why is this not in there? You know, is it in the end? Is it in the final section? Did I miss something? I don't think so. Here's a final example which has more clear instructions on how to get to hell. So this is from Petalia, 4th century BCE, known as B1. You will find in the halls of Hades a spring on the left, and standing by it a glowing white cypress tree. Do not approach this spring at all. You will find another from the lake of memory, refreshing water flowing forth. But guardians are nearby. Say, I am the child of earth and starry heaven. My race is heavenly, and this you know yourselves. I am parched with thirst, and I perish, but give me quickly the refreshing water flowing forth from the lake of memory. And then they will give you the drink from the divine spring, and then you will celebrate. And at this point, the text is unclear. Heroes. This is the thing of memory when you were about to die, shadow covering around. So there's quite a lot in Katabasis that refers to memory, the idea of forgetfulness, that in order to maybe recover from a horrific assault that is part of the story, that you need to forget it, or forgetting is part of forgiveness. These are some of the themes that Kuang is attempting to engage with, particularly with the Lethe and the later sections of hell. Again, very much feeling like, oh my goodness, you're trying really, really hard to make it thematic and kind of nailing it into our heads. But these are sort of compelling notations from a possible Orphic cult, and I think it would have added something to the whole story to make use of the tablets, especially in the way they describe the need to prove that you have the right to be in the underworld and then how to find your way around. So in the early portion of the book, when they first get into hell and they get beyond the kind of the limbo state, they have this wall of bone that they have to climb. And it felt like, oh, I think you could have done this better. I wasn't into the wall. Why not have this set of Orphic tablets that you've got that allow you to approach somebody significant, and you find your way around, you go past the cypress tree. I was almost expecting it. I was kind of confused, having worked on the Orphic tablets and these depictions of going down into Hades, that you wouldn't have them present at all. I think that kind of negotiation would have been far more effective than the wall climb. Looking back on that, considering how much time Kuang spent on telling us how little Alice had been eating, and what I know about climbing, because I have been climbing, I struggle to believe that she'd have done as well as she did to get over that wall. Why not engage with these sort of material indicators of a real cult that was focused on this journey into hell? It just felt like, why not do that? I mean, at this point, feel free to accuse me of look how smart I am-ing RF Kuang, because a lot of her books are, oh, look how smart I am. And yes, go into the comments. Yeah, I'm doing the same thing as her. I'm just saying, look, I know stuff you don't know. Now, Unresolved Textual Tension did a roast. They brought out this aspect to Katabasis. I'm going to emphasise it too. The ongoing journey through hell is so much less well developed than the backstory, the budding relationship between Alice and Peter. I mean, my God, you could have done this story as just the romance. She gets to Cambridge and she meets this guy and she doesn't like him, he's at competition. Why make that the backstory? That was far more interesting than hell. I can't believe I'm saying that. I can't be saying go to hell and it's dull. Hell is boredom. I actually felt really drawn in at points. I've been a research assistant. I know the inside out of the precarity of living, the difficulty, the late nights, all of that. Research, my brain latching onto something and suddenly it's 1 a.m. and I've been looking at catalogues for hours. My God, this is the problem. Hell itself is mostly boring. Pride and Lust were, as far as I could tell, the only two courts that Kuang ever put any real thought into. They are meant to be mirrors of the academic world. So Pride reveals the pomposity of scholars getting caught up in research, trapped in a library from which they can never escape. It reflects, I think, the sense of having tenure, having a position, security, of never having to look out for anybody else, and the constant pressure to produce essays, to produce research. Then we have Lust or Desire, which was sort of as slickly disgusting as you might have expected. It was a bit predictable. I did feel as though, rather than going for the conventional sexual, physical overtones, Kuang could have thought in more depth about how a desire for academic success at the highest level strips people down in a colder, more brittle way than she describes. Her approach is to make it about the body, when much of the rest of the story views Alice and Peter in terms of kind of lust of the mind instead. And I was conscious all of the time of the denial of the body, both in Alice's story and in Peter's, as we'll get to. That there's an asceticism to scholarship and research that I felt was just completely wiped away. People not being reduced to the organ of their body that is driving them, hunger, lust, sexual lust, whatever. Rather than that, thinking about it in terms of academic asceticism. And weirdly, she kind of does it in Pride, and I wonder if, off the cuff, if she was actually kind of stuck because she'd sort of covered it in the library sense in Pride, and then you couldn't go back to it. Everything about Alice and Peter is about the denial of the body in this pursuit of the mind, like the removal of the body, the removal of physical desire. And I think really understanding that this asceticism is part of lust. Part of lust is the lust for perfect grades. part of lust is the desire for everybody in academia to love you and being the most perfect wafy person. So that's my thought. Peter denies his Crohn's disease, which we're going to come back to. It's never reflected upon, and it suffers from this failure to just kind of ugly to read. And then those are the only two courts she really develops in any detail. Hell gets tedious. I wasn't especially convinced either by the antagonism of the Cripp case. So the Cripp case are these two twins who practice magic outside of academia. It represents the independent scholar who goes nuts, I think. That is me, and I'm not liking it. It felt like they were being thrown into the story almost because there's no external antagonist to be found in Hell otherwise. Hell is blank and it's kind of empty. There's not much tension going on in Hell. And I cannot believe that is a sentence that I have to write. Like, I don't believe I have to say that. Oh, Hell, no antagonism. Oh, big whoop. Antagonism should really be fundamental, and it felt like it was latched on. Like the Kripkes had arrived in Hell. They had killed themselves to get there. And I think this is meant to reflect on, what independent scholars who are desperate to get the recognition of an institution are stuck with. But it just doesn't work. I just felt that they weren't really all that scary. It just felt that they'd been lumped in. I was like, oh, right, okay, they're there. I wasn't scared by their bone creatures. I thought, well, that feels a bit obvious. Bone creatures, surely you could have gone a bit higher than the body horror that's evident in Katabasis. It's not done particularly well. So early on when I was reading, and I got through Pride and then we got to Lust, and I didn't like Lust. And then I really wanted to see developments of the other courts of Hell in terms of how they might apply to academia. I wanted to see those kind of mirrors. I really wanted to see her interrogate academia from that perspective, because doing a PhD in and entering academia on that level is a Katabasis. It is going to Hell. And I really felt that she had missed an opportunity. So she even skips through the other courts to the city of Dis. I found that all of Hell was just this empty plain where nothing particularly happens. Nobody's particularly doing anything. There aren't even any shades. Nothing relates to her. The Elspeth section, weird. I didn't kind of relate to it. She sold us the Lethe as this very frightening thing that would steal all of your memories. And of course, she's not affected by that because she has this perfect memory that's been created by this analytic experiment that she did with her supervisor, Jacob Grimes. And now she can't forget anything. So there's that theme that's meant to be going on underneath. The feeling of being mentally overwhelmed, which is another aspect of academia. She skips to the city of Dis, even though she feels like she's bored at this point. She feels like she's bored of engaging with Hell at all. Much more of the book has been spent discussing Alice and Peter's relationship. And there's a small section of Dis that I do buy into, and that's the idea of endlessly writing a thesis, submitting it and never finding out what the conclusion is. This goes back to my Audra Winter video where I talked about never really being able to confront and edit your work and just rewriting the same thing over and over again. And I felt like that kind of effectively represented the kind of the hellscape that you go into, especially in the writing up stage where you're just continually writing and rewriting and submitting and never getting anywhere. That kind of felt effective. Editors, who effectively write the thesis for you, the paper mills that show up. At times that did feel too on the nose, along with her portrayal of academic pride. For a PhD student, life is constantly writing and submitting and never quite getting anything right. And I think it's one of the points in the book, and there are a lot of them, where unless you have been a real life PhD student, you don't really get what it's like. So I had this discussion yesterday with a course convener actually, and he was talking about how many PhDs Bruce Banner had, and all of the Avengers really, multiple PhDs. if you're an academic, if you have more than one PhD, that's considered to be weird. Like, there's no reason for you to do more than one PhD. You're knocking yourself back and recreating studentdom for no particular reason. If you're not really aware of what a PhD is and what it takes, especially in the humanities, you know, piling on PhDs to a character just seems, oh yeah, that's a thing you do. I do wonder, actually, as I'm talking about this, if Kuang is attempting to have a go at dark academia because it's often written from the outside as if they understand what doing a PhD is like without really getting what doing a PhD is like. Now, we get to this point in City of Dis, and I was getting frustrated with Hell because it was either empty desert or it was too obvious. I feel as though Kuang got partway through the journey and she just abandoned it. She just abandoned the whole idea. The Lethe isn't scary after they meet Elspeth, and I got bored in those sections. It felt kind of obvious. I had no sense of tension. The Katabasis portion feels intensely like Kuang had this great premise. What if you had accidentally deliberately killed your supervisor, because the man is an ass, via a magical accident and had to go to hell to get him back, even though he was utterly awful and had tried to essay you? Would you do that thing? And an awful lot of final year PhD students would probably say yes. You get invested on that premise. You know, if someone came up to me and said, oh, you know, you literally got to go to hell to get your supervisor back so you can pass your final panel. Yup. Probably me. But she hasn't really gone beyond the first two courts. Like, she's gone, oh, this would be great if I did this, and Lust would look like this, and then she hasn't bothered with any of the others. Okay, now we come to Peter Murdoch, and I'm gonna have to have coffee to get myself through this because we're going into disability and chronic illness now. For about the first half of the book, Peter has what I think of as the wafty white boy aesthetic. He is brilliant. Everybody idolizes him because he doesn't seem to have to try hard to get those perfect grades. Alice hates him because of this, because he is the model scholar that gets prizes without effort. And there is a particular aesthetic within academia of being so perfect and brilliant, but never actually needing to work for it. Set up through the early portions of Katabasis to dislike him. Seen through Alice's eyes, he's the competition that we can never match. There's a moment where her supervisor, Jacob Grimes, says, that's your competition, that's the person you're up against. I've been an academic, you know, with being a PhD student with a supervisor who had multiple students. He's absolutely perfect. He is going to get a paper through peer review in his first year. He is everything the academic establishment really loves. You know, white, male, obscure, bizarre, brilliant. While we are not. So everybody adores and kind of wants to be him and sort of hates him at the same time. However, slightly before Peter sacrifices himself to save Alice in the Escher trap, we get his backstory as a kind of info dump. We're introduced to him and what is really going on with him. We were wrong about Peter. All along, Peter was suffering just like everybody else. So he has Crohn's. This kind of troubles me because it uses chronic illness as a means to bait and switch the reader into empathizing with Peter and seeing the kind of behind the curtain. He isn't the chaotic genius we think he is. He has Crohn's. My mother has Crohn's and I have the same kind of issues going on. I'm probably going to get diagnosed at some point. Yeah, 47 now, and this kind of thing is coming up. It is a devastating illness. I knew someone, I think she was in my seminar group, who was diagnosed with Crohn's really seriously. And she went from being an academic star to major surgery to really struggling intensely with academic life. Now, I really struggled as well because I was autistic, but I was undiagnosed. I had an eating disorder and it was a constant battle, and it is still a constant battle. So I'm coming at it from that particular level. I think that Peter's backstory is meant to be a critique of the way academia treats disability and chronic illness. In setting up Peter as the perfect wafty white male student whose perfection disguises his chronic illness, Kuang is attempting to engage with the way that academia is going to love you as long as you can perform perfection. It will crush you if you ever admit weakness or struggle. Peter's inability to treat himself with care, falling apart and refusing to take the medication he needs is supposed to emphasize that. I think this goes back to the idea of asceticism and the denial of the body that Alice also does in terms of not eating, and emphasizing not eating as I resisted the urge to eat, which borders on an ED. It really is heading into that territory. I have been trying to put my finger on why it bugged me so much, but it does. Peter spirals because of his desire to be the perfect student in the same way that Alice does. This should make me feel incredibly seen because I have gone through that, I've experienced that, and this is my life now. At the same time, I feel like I was never able to attain that scrap of being the perfect student, the perfect doctoral candidate. So I don't know if it's just me. I am troubled by the use of disability to humanize somebody who has been set up to be the competition in that way. Now, I do want to see more representation of real chronic illness in fiction, especially in a way that simply makes it a thing that's there, not something that is overcome or magicked away or just disappeared. But I felt like it was kind of tacked on. I wasn't sure how I felt about the narrative of his upbringing, of him having cut himself off from absolutely everybody else. It felt like it didn't work. I'm going to come back to it not working. I feel like I should be glad that Kuang thought to consider disability in academia at all as a massive issue. Back when I used to post on Blue Sky, I saw a PhD candidate at one point say he'd realised that the only way to do a PhD is in the 15-minute gaps between all of the other things you have to do. So going to conferences, writing papers, going to training, teaching, grading papers, just existing in the world, trying to find things, reading books. And I remarked at the time that I thought that this was devastating because I'm autistic and I'm monotropic. I cannot jump tasks and topics like that. I cannot do a PhD. I cannot do serious research in tiny 15-minute chunks. That is just not how my brain works. That is also exhausting. It's exclusionary. On top of that, what seems like one task to the neurotypical or the allistic world is 10 tasks for me. And I am conscious all the time, being so close to burnout, of how going to look at our teaching system is now like that's 10 tasks. This relates to, more specifically, the period setting. That seems like a bizarre and out of pocket choice. And the more I think about it, and me talking about it right now makes me actually angry. Kuang sets this in the early 1980s. Why not set this in the 2020s? Why not go hard, go up to date, set this in the 2020s? What were you thinking? If you thought things were rough in academia in 1984, they sure as hell are doubly brutal now. I wonder if it's because she thought that analytic magic wouldn't survive as a discipline into 2025, given technological developments of the early 1980s, the rise of the internet, computer technology, magical forces in the world. She hints at points that analytic magic has lost its luster as a subject simply because it doesn't have anything new to offer society and hasn't engaged with the rapid pace of non-magical tech. So she's trying to make some kind of other point. You can make this way better in 2025. Set this in the present. Set this in what is going on now in academia. In disciplines like the humanities, classics has pretty much being defunded at Chicago. No more PhDs coming out of there. Chicago is also where the Transmission of Magical Knowledge project is taking place. Why not do that? Why not go in on that? We desperately need critiques of academia, I think particularly because, on the other hand, you have this dark academia aesthetic that has become so popular and people kind of embracing this from the external point, especially Oxbridge, especially the Ivy League universities. Very glamorous, very mysterious, very wafty. And I'm using that word way too much. But you know what I'm getting at? It's this romanticization of the scholarly aesthetic at a time when, in the real world, academia is being absolutely destroyed. It has been hell for the last few years. And this is me on my soapbox getting mad because I'm having to live through it. I am actually having to live with the knowledge that my academic career may just collapse, not because I wasn't able to get the fellowships because I applied for them and didn't get them, and I tried my best and it didn't happen. I wasn't good enough, but because senior academics that I really needed to reply to my emails just didn't reply because they're working 60 hours on a 40-hour contract. I am only paid 7 months out of the year. We've watched in the US so many researchers just wake up one day and discover that they didn't have a job, that everything had been taken away. We have MAHA happening. In STEM, we have the dismantling of a health service. Right now, as I'm talking about this, we have a government shutdown, which means Snap is going to disappear. We've got people on the internet just begging for money, desperately trying to help each other. GoFundMes for medical support. Wow, it felt like such a cop-out. What are you doing? It's hell now. We're in hell in academia. It is an absolute nightmare. In the UK, we have job cuts being announced weekly in the hundreds, especially in the humanities. Having to argue the case that your work has any value, even though people want to go to museums, they want to know about ancient magic, they want to know about all of this stuff. So what are you supposed to do? Esoterica lost his job over the summer, so he's now dependent on YouTube for an income. It's absolutely terrible. The fact that this is going on all the time, and she sets this in this really remote, disconnected era. Like, who cares about the 1980s? Yeah, it was bad then, but it's nearly as brutal as it is now. Technically speaking, we are supposed to have structures in place that protect us. They're supposed to make it much harder for the Jacob Grimeses of the world to survive. Now, I'm going to question that in a world where, in 2025, earlier this year, the book The War on Science was published by Lawrence Krauss. Now, Sean has done a thorough deep dive on the contributors to that volume, starting with the links between the editor and contributors to Jeffrey Epstein. What? Just, oh my God. So, outright white supremacy, basic racism, sexism, misogyny, anti-transness, all of them. The far right, fascism, right on the pages of that book. And claiming that they are somehow the good guys in academia. The problems haven't gone away, they've actually magnified. So setting the book in the 1980s kind of robs it of any real power to actually really engage with the romanticization of dark academia at a time when real academia is just falling to bits. Now, I mentioned earlier sort of Ernest Cline's Ready Player One and the book's desire to use this constant referencing shibboleths to gatekeep who can understand it. And it feels like this attempt to kind of engage with academic nostalgia. It's supposed to be a worse time, the rise of Reagan and Thatcher. I mean, who hasn't looked at Reagan and Thatcher and felt all of the magic drain from their bones? It's aimed at, so I don't know whether it's aimed at nerds like me who grew up in that era and discovered in the late 40s and 50s that we're just trapped in a soul-sucking system we can't get out of and we have no prospects of anything improving. So this applies to literally everyone, and it's not just academics. You can't skewer the academic system if the academic system you are attempting to skewer exists 40 years ago and is not the academic system we have in place now. The issue around disability is particularly difficult because she's attempting to do this for the 1980s when there was no real protections in place for disabled people and chronically ill people. We didn't get the Equality Act in the UK until the 1990s. That's bad. That's really bad. But the thing is, those issues haven't gone away. They've become magnified. The asceticism of abandoning your body, of being able to overcome these issues has just simply become more persistent. The fact that we have technical laws in place that are meant to protect us doesn't mean they actually protect us in real life. And if you wanted to do an effective skewering of how academia does not engage with the fact that it is exclusionary to disabled and chronically ill academics who want to work in these disciplines, going back to the 1980s just misses the point entirely. Problem is right now, and it's so much worse right now, because disabled and chronically ill academics are the ones who are much more likely to end up living on the margins as independent scholars, unable to get proper funding for their research, and by extension, not being able to get it out to the public unless we kind of, sit in a room doing YouTube. So, yeah, I'm mad. To give you an absolute worked example, because I do love my worked examples, anyone who knows me on this channel, here in England and Wales, we have various ways that people can get support through the government in order to stay in work or just get support. So PIP, I've tried applying for PIP. Oh my God, you have to be so good at doing the things that I can't do in order to get these things, like filling out forms and doing all of this research and getting people to support you. Back in September 2024, I applied for Access to Work, which is meant to pay for adjustments so that you can remain in work. I did not even get a reply until June 2025 for me to get an assessment, and then the supports were only approved as I started work in September. Anyone who follows me on Threads will have seen me ranting in the last week or so about how I've been given a lot of supports that I can't access, because in order to do that, I have to do things I can't do because of being disabled. It's like saying to somebody with severe mobility issues they can only get help if they climb 20 flights of stairs. Or deaf support if they go and listen to the telephone. It's just ridiculous. I've got some kind of software and the training is 2 hours long. I can't focus on anybody else talking to me for 2 minutes directly, let alone 2 hours. I will happily listen to a YouTube video, by the way, for 2 hours because it's relaxed and I'm not supposed to do the face shapes and all the rest of that. In many ways, the fact that we are supposed to have these supposed supports available presents a more subtly discriminatory and damaging situation for disabled and chronically ill academics than when they never existed in the first place. Because in order to get them and maintain them, you effectively have another full-time job on top of the other full-time job that you're doing, 16 hours a week on a 40-hour contract as standard. I'm on 0 hours contract right now. But, so not counting everything else you have to do entirely for free to maintain your academic standards, the publish or perish model, which is being destroyed now by AI papers all over the place. I have mentioned in this that I do kind of have an issue with dark academia and the romanticization of the academic aesthetic and the mystical dark academic aesthetic. I do get it in part. I think the fantasy of coming in and whirling around corridors on a cloud of whimsy is inspired by the struggle to get, into academia in the first place. It's exceptionally hard. Funding is disappearing all the time. And I'm aware also that for a significant chunk of people, me whinging about my insecure position when I have what is considered to be a really privileged situation of being able to do something that you want is going to be kind of like, don't do that. In the same way that society has built up the image of the starving artist, we're now kind of building up the image of the starving academic. So I'm not paid to do the actual research that I do. I am paid to go and teach people, and it's not based on my research. And I'm paid on an hourly contract, and now in a position where I have to check every single hour that I do, because otherwise I will end up working a full-time job when I'm only being paid for like 5 to 10 hours a week. In society that you have to suffer if you want to pursue something you love. Academia, the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, is seen as something that is, it's a massive privilege. And it is a privilege, except that it is now being stripped away from everyone. I want free education for everybody. I think that should be absolutely a founding principle of our society, because it is so valuable to society to be able to do that. And at every level, at any age, you should be able to walk in and come and do a degree. So there's a weird tension between this current distaste and hatred of experts that we're seeing coming out with Maha and the desire to aggrandize the image of a complicated, twisted, mysterious academic world. And that seems to be especially focused on the humanities, especially classics and its associated subject. So from the Secret History onwards, I felt weird when I've been around people who are obsessed with the Oxbridge aesthetic or the study of ancient languages. And haha, I say, having studied them myself and having done the most arcane side of that, it might be worth interrogating the desire to fantasize about suffering for the ivory tower of ivory towers. Classics is generally set up to be brutal on its students and on many campuses in a way that feels like that misery and suffering. That is what Kuang was really attempting to deconstruct in Katabasis, I feel. And I can't really tell if she is participating in glorifying it or really deconstructing it by sitting it in this odd period of time. It just doesn't work. Certainly, in order to deconstruct what she's trying to do, you have to be an insider to have any understanding of what's going on. Now, it feels very hard to complain and demand justice when we're expected to feel grateful for being able to do something we like or value in the world. That is an aspect of Katabasis that's actually absent. So Alice and Peter may occasionally reference the job market, which is now considerably worse than it was 40 years ago, but at no point does Kuang make any argument for the value of the academic work that they are doing. Now, it is possible to do that. We love museums. We want all of this stuff. We want to go to museums. We want magic out there in the world. We want stories. We want good material. That we are falling back in financial terms on the continual reboots of everything is just absolutely tedious. These are the things that make life worth living. She only presents negative value in terms of this obsession with knowing and learning and people pleasing. Like there's nothing else to it. And she only presents negative value in terms of Jacob Grimes's war work as having social value that anyone is willing to pay for. I couldn't see anything else in there at all. And it's almost as though all of the other things humanities does for our society is actually invisible. To reference them, but to show that they aren't valued by the government is one thing, but it's the sense that they're just entirely absent from this book altogether. So I'm sitting here feeling very angry and sad, and my coffee has now gone cold. So that's bad. It's not as bad drinking cold coffee as it is drinking cold tea, I suppose. So at this point, yes, I can see that it is trying to be very clever. I can see what it is trying to do. I do not feel that it did it convincingly. I don't have an alternative recommendation for you if you want to read something better. It feels as though, I don't know if it gets any better later on. I haven't even tackled in any depth the essay that goes on in this book. I should probably refer you to Unresolved Textual Tension, who have done a 2-hour deep dive into everything that they hated about the book. But that is my take as an academic, that I feel that it has thoroughly missed the opportunities that it set up. And I would not read this book. And that is it for this week. If you are interested in more of my work, I have videos that you can watch on ancient magic, on scrolls. I've done a piece on the Etsy witches last week. You can find me on Patreon, and I am also on Threads, where I just basically post pictures of my cat all the time and complain about the state of academia. And I will see you guys next week for another video. Take care.